What could make a Texas sheriff loosen his grip on a helpless blind veteran and start shaking before a single threat was made? October 1959, Red Mesa County, Texas. The old man's boots scraped across the gravel as Sheriff Wade Kessler twisted one arm behind his back and shoved him toward a patrol car. His dark glasses hung crooked. A faded army coat sagged from his shoulders. At his feet, a dented tin cup rolled in the dust, spilling 3 nickels and a penny beneath the diner porch. "I wasn't begging," the old man said. "I was waiting for someone." Kessler tightened his grip. "You've been waiting here every Thursday for 6 months. Inside Mabel's diner, forks stopped halfway to mouths. Ranchers stared through the glass. The waitress froze beside the coffee pot. Nobody stepped outside. In Red Mesa County, people had learned that Sheriff Kessler remembered anyone who embarrassed him. John Wayne stood beside a dusty station wagon at the edge of the lot. He had stopped for coffee on his way toward Brackettville. Until that moment, he had said nothing. He simply watched the sheriff force the old man forward. Then something tore loose from the veteran's coat and landed in the gravel. Wayne bent down and picked it up, a silver star, worn at the edges and polished by years of handling. On the back, scratched unevenly into the metal, were 4 words: "For Tommy, tell Wayne." The air seemed to leave the parking lot. Wayne stepped into the sheriff's path. "Before you put him in that car, you're going to tell me what he did." Kessler turned with an irritated smile. Then he recognized the man in front of him. But recognition was not what frightened him. His eyes dropped to the metal in Wayne's hand, and the color drained from his face. His fingers began to shake. Wayne noticed. He turned the metal over and spoke quietly. "You know what these words mean, don't you?" The sheriff did not answer. And in that silence, Wayne understood that this was no arrest for begging. Someone had spent 6 months making sure the blind veteran never reached the man he had been waiting for. The moment had not begun outside Mabel's diner. It had begun 6 months earlier, when Caleb Mercer unfolded the last letter his son would ever write. Caleb was 71, a communications sergeant who had crossed France before an artillery burst near St. Lo took his sight. He returned to Texas with a silver star and one rule: never ask another man for what you could earn yourself. His wife died in 1952. After that, his only family was Tommy, a Korean War veteran who helped disabled servicemen complete forms they could not read. Tommy noticed relief checks were disappearing. Men approved for medicine and food received nothing, while county records claimed every dollar had been delivered. He told Caleb someone inside Red Mesa's government was stealing from veterans. Caleb warned him to leave it alone. In a county controlled by Sheriff Kessler, banker Everett Sloan, and Judge Silas Rourke, the wrong question could ruin a man. 3 weeks later, Tommy's truck went through the railing of Dry Creek Bridge. Kessler called it an accident caused by rain. But the storm had not reached Red Mesa until nearly an hour after Tommy died. The letter arrived the next morning. Tommy instructed his father to visit Mabel's diner every Thursday, sit outside between noon and 2, carry the silver star, and wait for the tall man from the pictures. He added one warning: do not speak to the sheriff. The man who smiles first is the one you should fear. Caleb did not understand. Still, every Thursday for 6 months, he walked 3 miles to the diner. The dented cup carried coffee coins because he could hear them if they fell. Strangers mistook it for a begging cup. Caleb returned every coin, but Kessler encouraged the rumor until the town saw a nuisance instead of a veteran waiting for help. Now John Wayne stood in the parking lot, holding the medal Tommy had meant him to receive. He ran his thumb along its backing and felt something move. A strip of paper slipped into his palm. 4 numbers were written on it: 2147. Caleb heard Wayne read them and stopped breathing. "Those were Tommy's numbers," he whispered. "The combination he used when he had something he couldn't afford to lose." Wayne looked toward Kessler. The sheriff was no longer watching Caleb. He was staring at the paper and moving one hand toward his coat pocket. The sheriff tried to pull the moment back under his control before anyone found the courage to question him. He tightened his grip on Caleb Mercer's arm and looked directly at John Wayne, forcing a smile that never reached his eyes. He's violating the county ordinance against public solicitation, Sheriff Wade Kessler said. Nothing more. Now, if you'll step aside, Mr. Wayne, I'll finish doing my job. Wayne didn't move. Instead, he looked down at the old veteran whose wrists remained limp at his sides. Caleb wasn't struggling. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't even asking for mercy. He simply stood there, listening to the wind move across the empty Texas highway as though he had already accepted whatever happened next. Wayne finally spoke. Who filed the complaint? The sheriff blinked. What? The complaint, Wayne repeated calmly. Somebody must have complained before you arrested him. Who was it? For the first time since grabbing Caleb, Kessler hesitated. It isn't your concern. Dash? Wayne nodded slowly. Then maybe you'll answer the next one. If he's dangerous enough for handcuffs, why hasn't he resisted once? Silence spread across the diner porch. The ranchers who had been pretending not to watch slowly turned their chairs. Even the waitress, Mabel Torres, stepped outside, wiping her hands on her apron as she stared toward the patrol car. Kessler felt the crowd changing. He tried to regain control. This man has been begging outside this diner for months. Mabel shook her head before anyone else could answer. No, Sheriff. Every eye turned toward her. He never asked a single person for a penny. She pointed toward the dented tin cup lying in the gravel. He keeps his bus fare and grocery coins in that cup because he can't see well enough to find them in his pockets. Folks sometimes toss money in there thinking he's begging. Every single time he realizes it, he hands it back. An elderly rancher sitting near the window slowly removed his hat. She's telling the truth. Another customer nodded. I've seen him refuse money more than once. The sheriff's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected witnesses to speak. Wayne glanced down at the Silver Star medal, still resting in his palm. Beneath the ribbon, hidden almost invisibly inside the backing, was the folded slip of paper carrying the number 2147. He leaned closer to Caleb. Does that number mean anything to you? The blind veteran's expression changed immediately. His breathing caught. My Tommy, he whispered. Those were the last four numbers of his Army service number. A chill seemed to move through everyone standing there. Caleb slowly turned his face toward Wayne. My boy used those numbers whenever he hid something important. Before Wayne could ask another question, Sheriff Kessler suddenly stepped forward and reached for the medal. It's evidence connected to the arrest. Wayne closed his fingers around it before the sheriff could touch it. Their eyes met. Neither man spoke, but in that long, silent moment, Wayne understood something far more dangerous than the arrest itself. The sheriff wasn't trying to seize the medal because it belonged in an evidence locker. He was terrified of whatever it might lead them to, and that meant Tommy Mercer hadn't left those four numbers by accident. He had left them as a trail for someone brave enough to follow. John Wayne slipped the Silver Star into the inside pocket of his jacket before looking back at Sheriff Kessler. If Tommy Mercer hid those numbers, he said quietly, then he expected somebody to find whatever they point to. The sheriff's face remained hard, but something behind his eyes shifted. It lasted only a second, yet Wayne caught it. It wasn't anger anymore, it was worry. Caleb slowly lifted his head. Tommy once told me, he whispered, if anything ever happened to him, there was a place nobody would think to look. He closed his eyes, trying to force old memories back into focus. An old livestock way station, 8 miles east of town, where the railroad stopped shipping cattle years ago. Luis Ortega, who had remained silent until then, suddenly stepped forward. His weathered face had turned pale. I remember it, he said. Tommy asked me to help him replace some rotten floorboards there last spring. I thought he was just trying to keep snakes out. The sheriff interrupted before another word could be spoken. That station was torn down years ago. Luis looked directly at him. Funny, he replied. I never said which station. For the first time, several people on the diner porch exchanged uneasy glances. The sheriff had answered a question nobody had asked. Wayne noticed it immediately. Innocent men corrected facts. Guilty men anticipated them. Within 20 minutes, 2 pickup trucks were rolling across the dusty ranch roads toward the abandoned way station. Thick clouds gathered over the Texas plains, throwing long shadows across the empty fields. Caleb sat beside Wayne without speaking, one hand resting gently on the old medal in his lap. Finally, he broke the silence. "My boy wasn't afraid for himself," he said. "He was afraid somebody would keep stealing from men who'd already given everything they had." Wayne nodded, but kept his eyes on the road. He had met enough veterans to know that some battles never ended when the shooting stopped. The way station appeared exactly where Caleb remembered. Rusted steel beams leaned crooked against the sky, and broken cattle pens disappeared into waist-high weeds. Wind whistled through loose sheets of corrugated metal, making the abandoned building sound almost alive. Luis walked directly to the old weighing platform. "I helped Tommy replace these boards," he said. He knelt, pulled a rusted crowbar from beneath the platform, and pried up two weathered planks. Beneath them rested a small gray metal cash box. Nobody spoke. Even Sheriff Kessler had stopped pretending to be calm. Wayne wiped years of dust from the lid. Fixed to the front was a 4-digit combination lock. Slowly, he turned the dial. 2147. The lock clicked open. Inside lay neatly stacked folders wrapped in oilcloth. Dozens of canceled government payment records, photographs of endorsed veterans' relief checks, a handwritten ledger filled with names and dollar amounts, and one sealed envelope. Across the front, written in careful block letters, were 7 words that made every person standing there fall completely silent. "For Mr. John Wayne, if I'm too late." Wayne stared at the envelope for several long seconds before carefully breaking the seal. The first sentence inside stopped him cold. "Mr. Wayne, if you're reading this, they reached me before I could reach you." Nobody spoke while John Wayne finished reading Tommy Mercer's letter. The only sound inside the abandoned way station was the wind rattling the loose tin roof overhead. Wayne carefully folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. When he looked up, his expression had changed. This was no longer about stopping an unfair arrest. It was about finishing something a dead soldier had started. The folders inside the cash box told the rest of the story. Page after page listed disabled veterans whose federal assistance checks had disappeared before ever reaching their hands. Every missing payment had been redirected through county accounts authorized by Sheriff Wade Kessler, County Judge Silas Rourke, and banker Everett Sloan. The scheme had stolen tens of thousands of dollars from men who had already sacrificed enough for their country. Then Sheriff Kessler saw an opportunity. He pointed toward one page near the bottom of the ledger. "There," he said loudly, "read that name." Wayne looked down. Tommy Mercer's signature appeared beside one of the payment records. For one painful second, the entire room fell silent. Caleb's shoulders slowly collapsed. "No," he whispered, "not my boy." The sheriff stepped closer. "I told you from the beginning," he said. "Your son wasn't exposing corruption. He was part of it. When he realized he was about to be caught, he ran. That bridge accident wasn't murder. It was guilt." The words struck Caleb harder than any punch ever could. The old veteran lowered his head, gripping the silver star so tightly that his trembling fingers turned white. After months of believing his son had died trying to do the right thing, doubt had finally found its way into his heart. But John Wayne wasn't looking at the accusation. He was studying the signature. Something about it bothered him. He flipped through several earlier documents, comparing each signature carefully. Then he stopped. "Luis," Wayne asked quietly, "did Tommy ever injure his right hand?" Luis nodded without hesitation. "Last winter, a horse threw him against a fence. His wrist was broken so badly he couldn't even button his own shirt for weeks. He had to learn to write with his left hand." Wayne held up the ledger. "Then these signatures couldn't have been written by Tommy." Everyone leaned closer. "The early signatures are right-handed. These later ones are right-handed too. Whoever forged them didn't know Tommy couldn't use that hand anymore." For the first time since arriving at the way station, Sheriff Kessler had no answer. His confident expression disappeared completely. Then, in the distance, the unmistakable sound of a car engine echoed across the empty prairie. Luis looked toward the road, his face draining of color. "It's Everett Sloan," he said. The county banker had found them, and judging by the speed of his approaching car, he wasn't coming to talk. Everett Sloane's black Cadillac slid to a stop at a cloud of dust only a few yards from the abandoned way station. Before anyone could react, the county banker jumped out and rushed toward the open cash box. His eyes weren't on John Wayne or Caleb Mercer. They were locked on the ledger lying across the old weighing platform. "That book doesn't belong to you," Sloane shouted. He grabbed one end of the ledger, trying to rip it from Wayne's hands. The pages scattered across the wooden platform, fluttering in the wind like frightened birds. Sheriff Kessler lunged forward at the same moment, hoping the evidence would disappear into the tall grass before anyone could recover it. But Wayne moved first. He caught the most important folder before it blew away, while Luis Ortega tackled another stack against one of the rusted support beams. The young deputy, who until now had remained silent, bent down and picked up a folded document that had landed near his boots. His eyes widened. "This isn't county paperwork," he said quietly. "It came from the Federal Veterans Administration." The deputy unfolded the final page. At the bottom sat 3 signatures: Judge Silas Rourke, Everett Sloane, Sheriff Wade Kessler. Above those names was a statement certifying that every disabled veteran in Red Mesa County had received full financial assistance. Caleb never received a single dollar. Neither had dozens of other veterans listed in the files. The deputy slowly looked up at his sheriff. "You sign this." Kessler opened his mouth, but no words came. For the first time in 14 years, the badge on his chest carried no authority. It carried proof. John Wayne stepped forward and calmly held up Tommy Mercer's letter for everyone to see. "You arrested a blind veteran," he said quietly, "because you thought he was waiting for charity." He paused. He wasn't waiting for charity. He was waiting for someone honest enough to finish what his son started. Sheriff Wade Kessler stared at the scattered evidence lying all around him. Then, for the first time that afternoon, his hands began to shake. Federal investigators arrived in Red Mesa County before sunrise the following morning. By the end of the week, Sheriff Wade Kessler, Judge Silas Rourke, and banker Everett Sloane had all been charged with conspiring to steal veterans' relief funds. The missing records hidden beneath the abandoned way station became the evidence that unraveled years of corruption, returning thousands of dollars to veterans who had almost given up believing justice would ever find them. John Wayne never held a press conference. He never claimed credit for exposing the scheme. When reporters asked about the incident months later, he simply replied, "The brave man wasn't me. He was the one who left the truth behind, believing someone would eventually finish the job." Caleb Mercer received every dollar that had been stolen from him, but the money was never what mattered most. On a quiet autumn afternoon, he stood beside his son's newly restored headstone while a local honor guard folded an American flag with full military honors. For the first time since Tommy's death, Caleb smiled through his tears because the town finally knew the truth. His son had never been a thief. He had died trying to protect men who had already sacrificed enough for their country. Outside the same Texas diner where the story had begun, the owner placed Tommy's silver star inside a small glass display case. Beneath it rested a simple brass plaque with words that every customer stopped to read. He was never begging. He was waiting for someone to listen. Sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't fighting a battle. Sometimes it's refusing to let the truth be buried, even when the whole town tells you to walk away.